Picture an ordinary family dinner. A parent makes a comment, just sharp enough to sting, just deniable enough that calling it out would sound paranoid. The child stays quiet the first time. The second comment comes, then the third, each one landing on the exact same bruise. Everyone at the table can feel the pressure building. Naming that tension is the child's job, but doing that job is exactly what gets them in trouble. So they sit and swallow it. Finally, the pressure breaks. The kid says something too loud, pushes back too hard, or leaves the table entirely. In that instant, the whole room rearranges around a single verdict. The 40 minutes of quiet provocation vanish from the record, and only the last 10 seconds count. The family points and says, "Look how they ruin every meal. Look how they can't control themselves." The explosion was engineered. The person who lit the fuse plays the role of the calm parent who only wanted a nice dinner. The child was maneuvered into proving a story the parent had already written. Out of all the children in a troubled house, one specific child is handed all the blame. You might expect the family to target the weakest or the most troubled member. In a house built on a specific narrative, the chosen child is often the one who cannot perform the family lie with a straight face. They notice when things are wrong and say so, bringing a stubborn commitment to the truth into a room that requires silence. Their perceptiveness makes them a threat to the family's stability. Every family produces mistakes, resentment, and shame. Healthy families metabolize that ordinary mess. People apologize, they repair, they take their share. But a parent whose self-image is deeply fragile has no internal place to put their own flaws. They cannot look at their shame directly. Because that shame cannot be destroyed, it creates an emotional vacuum. The negative feelings have to go somewhere, so they are systematically displaced onto someone else. The child carrying the blame often has the most intact moral compass in the house. They are punished for their psychological integrity. They can see the mess, and they refuse to pretend they can't. Psychologists have a precise clinical name for how this displacement actually works: projective identification. The process is simple. A parent takes the parts of themselves they cannot bear to own, the cruelty, the inadequacy, the rage, and pushes those traits into the child. Then they treat the child as if they naturally carry those flaws. The pioneering psychoanalyst Melanie Klein described the exact logic of this dynamic almost a century ago. She observed that when you force a piece of yourself into another person, you can only manage that uncomfortable feeling by controlling them. The parent disowns a feeling, installs it in the child, and then manages their own internal distress by policing the child's every move. This keeps the parent's shame at a safe distance.
The process begins with projection, explicitly assigning a disowned trait to the child. Next is interpretation, filtering the child's benign actions through that negative lens. Finally, induction. The parent actively provokes the accused behavior until the child snaps, pointing to the reaction as proof. But a system this efficient rarely runs on one child alone. There is usually a counterpart, the golden child. This child is handed the job of reflecting the parent's grandiosity back at them, balancing out the family's emotional ecosystem. One child holds the light, and one child holds the dark. The parent narrates this dynamic to siblings and relatives until a singular delusion becomes a family-wide consensus. When every adult in the room agrees with the label, the child accepts the role as the absolute truth about who they are. This assumption is the wound. When the chosen child finally leaves the family home, the external punishment doesn't stay behind. Through years of repetition, the role becomes an internal self-concept. Therapists recognize this internalized shame as a fawn response. Because the people who were supposed to protect the child were also the ones they had to appease to stay safe, the adult nervous system is wired to over-apologize and shrink down to avoid blame before it lands. Adult survivors describe a constant hypervigilance, scanning for the first sign they are about to be cast as the problem again. A toxic shame sits underneath their achievements, whispering that they are one mistake away from being found out. There is a quieter trap, too. A nervous system trained in childhood goes looking for what it knows. This can lead an adult towards toxic partners or hostile workplaces where they somehow become the one everything gets pinned on. The adult learns to mistake the familiar feeling of blame for the feeling of safety.
Until the pattern is recognized, they will continue to step into the same role they learned as a child. The first step to dismantling the system is separating the assigned role from the actual truth. The blame you carried was an assignment handed out to serve someone else's needs. It was never a measurement of your character. Handing that assignment back does not mean winning an argument. It rarely means getting an apology, and the people who built the system will likely never see what they did. The real work happens inside. It is catching the inner critic and realizing that your empathy, your honesty, and your sense of justice were treated as defects because they were the traits the system couldn't control. The problem child label was a description of what the fragile family system could not mentally hold. The scapegoat carries the shame of seeing the truth. This burden was assigned by a system in need of a container, and it can be set down the moment it is recognized as a role rather than a flaw.